There is no hood like parenthood. Hi, I'm Kanika Chadda Gupta. I'm a former CNN journalist, mom of 3, including twins, and host of That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast. Now, if I had $1 every time I heard, gee, you have your hands full. On my show, I interview change makers on their life lessons, legacy, and superpower of intuition, which I call our mom sense and dad sense. I've had the privilege of working with Mom 2.0, March of Dimes, and the White House, and have had some pretty amazing parents on my show.
Hey, what's up? I'm Kelly Rowland.
Hi, this is Chelsea Clinton.
It's me, Bobby Brown. Can't wait to share my story.
That's Total Mom Sense is a production of the Evergreen Podcast Network. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube so you never miss an episode. To join my tribe, visit that'stotalmomsense.com and follow me on Instagram at Kanika Chadda Gupta. Now let's dive into today's episode. Today, I'm interviewing the founder and mastermind behind a brand we all know and love. She remarketed something ingenious, water, H2O. It's 70% of our body mass and we need it to survive. But wouldn't it be nice if it tickled our taste buds too? You've seen it on shelves in mass retailers like Target, Walmart, and Whole Foods. Okay, let me just tell you, it's Kara Goldin, who's the founder of Hint Inc., and she's best known for its award-winning Hint water, the leading unsweetened flavored water. Kara served as CEO for 17 years and is still a proud member of the board. She's received numerous accolades, including being named EY Entrepreneur of the Year in 2017 in Northern California and one of InStyle's 2019 Badass 50. Previously, Kara was VP of Shopping Partnerships at America Online. She's truly multifaceted because she hosts her podcast, The Kara Goldin Show, and her first book, Undaunted, Overcoming Doubts and Doubters, which released in October 2020, is now a Wall Street Journal and Amazon bestseller. Kara lives in the Bay Area with her family and her 3 Labradors. Kara, welcome to That's Total Mom Sense.
Thank you. So excited to be here and so honored.
Our interaction has been so organic from the onset. You know, we met through our common friend, Ben Watson, and have, so many other friends in our midst together, from Bina Shah to Palak Patel. And I feel like we were destined to meet and we just get each other. I really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. It's super, super great.
Okay, so entrepreneurs are really, really fascinating people. They're always problem solving. And I feel like you are a born entrepreneur. You call yourself an accidental one, but you're not. I mean, in your book, you really illustrate how you've been so scrappy and resourceful from such a young age. You were the youngest of 5 in Scottsdale, Arizona. You dabbled in so many things. So take us back to your childhood.
When you're the youngest of 5, you feel like your parents are tired. I said that in my book. I've talked in a number of interviews about this, and the number of people who have DM'd me on LinkedIn and where they're like, that so resonates with me. Like, it's like back then it's like, why doesn't anyone pay attention to me? And why can't they help me? But then later on in life, it becomes this like, well, I became independent and resourceful because I had to be. And it's true. I mean, it's like you take whatever circumstances you grow up in and make the best of them. Not to say that my upbringing wasn't great, but I think whenever you're a kid, you feel like the grass is greener on the other side. And I think my parents instead were very much about, you need to figure out a lot on your own. I was a big gymnast and was also a runner. And so my parents would like make me write out the schedule for them. We didn't have, calendaring systems or anything like that for the 5 kids. So they had all these pieces of paper and they'd make sure that if I had to be at a certain place, like it was my responsibility at a very young age to write out when these things are happening. So then my mom could figure out exactly how this was all going to play out, how I was going to get from A to B. And sometimes I would even have to figure out, like, that's not going to work because my brother has football over here and my sister has swimming and all of these different things. And so then I knew that I had to pick up the phone and call somebody and say, can I get a ride? And so I was doing that kind of stuff, problem solving at a very young age. And along the way, also helping other people figure that out too, where they're like, oh, I don't even know how I'm going to get home. Okay. And I'm like, well, so-and-so's mom said she could take me. Maybe you could come back to my house, eat dinner. And then okay, great. So Kara's got it all figured out. Right. And
Oh my
so
goodness.
it's so at a very young age I was putting the puzzle together, as I like to say it, which is such a key piece of leadership and entrepreneurship and actually just trying to figure out what's in front of you.
Yes, yes. And it's something that we really need to take a cue from and teach this generation. We had to figure it out because we didn't have as much at our disposal. There was no, like, forget Chat GPT. It's like, I remember when we first got dial-up internet. So there was so much that it's like, look it up or, go down the street and do this errand on your own. So yeah, I think that however we can simulate that is important because these are life skills that we all need.
Another thing that I realized, I was always very interested in people and their stories. And so the minute that I would see a moving truck go down our street, I would ride my bike to figure out who was moving in. Did they have kids? Did they have animals? I was always a huge animal lover. So I wanted to know, did they have cats? Did they have dogs? And how many kids did they have? And these parents they're like, can I help you? And I'm like, do you have any kids? We play chase around the block and we're always like I was always like the ringleader to bring
Right,
groups
right.
together. Sometimes I'd find out, like, what does the person do for a living? I tell my parents, I'm like, we should have them over for dinner. And my mom's like, that's like a lot. We have five kids, like, to have people over for dinner. I'm like, okay, well, maybe we could just have a barbecue or something. I don't know, like something really easy. So I was always like, trying to figure out, how do we bring connections? How do we get more of a community together? So that was always, my thing growing up. But the other thing I think that was really impactful, my mom was 40 years old when she had me, which back then was really old. So I had some of the oldest parents of any of my friends. And I also have a brother and a sister who are almost like another family. We all had the same parents, but they're 15 and 16 years older than me.
Wow.
So they were living in my house. I'm a little squirt, like still in diapers, and they're in, high school and starting college, right? And so such a different world on many levels. I mean, I remember one of my first memories was my oldest sister had friends of hers that were going off to Vietnam and not really understanding, why some of her friends were going to college and then other friends were actually going off to Vietnam. And so it just really impacting her for sure, and tears and crying and talking about it. Like, why is this happening? All of these kind of discussions that I barely understood, but I have a memory of them. When I started kindergarten, my mom decided that she wanted to go back to work, and she hadn't been working for years. She had been substitute teaching a little bit, but she hadn't been working for years, and she really wanted to have her own space and be able to do something. And she decided that she wanted to go into fashion. And so we all kind of looked around and thought, I mean, she's kind of fashionable, but like, it was definitely different. She was an art history major. And so she knew a ton about art, but not as much about fashion. And so she went to a store called Goldwater's that is no longer around in Scottsdale, but it was Barry Goldwater's family had started it. And she was in sales for them, but she was almost like a kind of a personal shopper. There wasn't that name, but she would be able to find anything. So she had people like all over, the US who would reach out to her because they knew that she was able to put things aside. And again, being able to switch careers, first of all, go back to work when she was in her mid 40s and totally switch careers was pretty crazy. And then she still loved art. She just didn't really know how to make a career out of it. She didn't want to work kind of in the museum space. And so she knew a lot about kids and she knew a lot about art. So the other thing that she did was, which I think was very entrepreneurial of her, was she decided that every child should really understand the classics in art. So she would go in, she created an after-school program. Anybody in the Scottsdale school system, in the public school system, who wanted to come in at lunch and learn about Van Gogh. And she would teach them, Picasso, how to recognize these artists from a very young age. And she talked about their stories. And, it was just amazing. And she didn't make any money from it. It was all volunteer, but she felt like she could create a difference just by being able to share those stories. Later on in life, I had such an appreciation on many levels for her just being able to say, I'm going to go start something. And no one was doing it. She said, I just want to know whether or not I can have some kind of impact. So I thought that was, very cool and obviously had some kind of impact on me as well.
One other thing about your mom is that she let you be this adventurer. And so, when you were doing gymnastics or running, you mentioned how you were always on crutches or had a cast or something. And so she never said, stop the sport, even for you to have the chutzpah to be like, I'm not going to quit just because of an injury.
All of us, all 5 of us were, doing some kind of sport. And it's interesting because I broke the most bones, hands down. Of the 5 kids, I was constantly breaking something. I just kept getting back up again. I learned so many things just by being a part of a team. I was always part of team. You never wanted to be the best on your team, because if you were the best on a team, then you weren't going to learn anything. And you didn't have anybody to aspire, which is sort of counter to what I think a lot of people think. They get, kids get bummed out that they're not better than Lisa or whatever. For me, it was always about, are there a lot of people on this team that are better than me? If there wasn't, I lost interest. And I was constantly looking for, I would define the team that I was on. Even if I was one of the better ones, I'd be like, it's just not that. I mean, it's okay, but it's not. And, in many ways, you could also look at it as I wouldn't give myself enough credit for ever, being one of the better ones on a team, even though your title might be CEO or manager or whatever. I always encouraged people who were, hiring people, do they know more than you do? If they don't know anything, then it's after a while, you're just going to be like, I have to teach them everything. And if you can't name, when you're interviewing people, if you can't name something that you're going to learn from this person, then they're probably not the right hire. And I still believe that today.
Hi, this is Kanika Chadda Gupta, television journalist, founder, and podcast host of That's Total Mom Sense.
Hi, everyone. I'm Claire Goss, the Senior Manager in the Education Department of Bright Horizons, and this is Play Matters with Bright Horizons.
On this weekly segment, we're double-clicking on the importance of play and how it's not just a pastime, it's crucial to learning for young children.
I'm here to clear up your misconceptions about play and learning. We're going to talk about the benefits of play, the different types of play, how to encourage play even when your child says, I'm bored.
So grab a notebook, the Notes app on your phone, or take some mental notes on today's takeaways and share them with your friends. Listen in because play matters. This segment is play, a foundation for success. There is a misconception around play because it's not just about having fun. There's so much more to it. It's also the first step to help set your child up for success. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I think you just touched on something really important, which is that when you ask a parent what they want for their kids, it's that I want them to be happy and successful and healthy, right? So there are things you can be doing right now as a parent of young children to set them up for success. And one of the big ones is letting them play. Like you said, it's not a nice to have, it's a must have for young children. It's so important that pediatricians have actually started writing prescriptions for play, like at well child checkups. If they can start to tell maybe that a child's not getting enough opportunity for play, they'll write a prescription for it. The United Nations has actually enshrined play as a fundamental human right of every child in the world. That's how important this is.
Oh my goodness, that's incredible. And I love that we are prioritizing it. Now, how do we build play into a child's day?
Yeah, so at Bright Horizons or any high quality early care and education program, play should be prioritized every single day. It should be celebrated. We really do believe, and we know from the research, that it's the best preparation for the school aged years and beyond, like later in life. So play just gives children that opportunity to learn about themselves, learn about the world around them. It basically helps them make sense of everything. It helps them make sense of their entire world.
So, for a lot of parents, when they hear play, they think mess. Cars everywhere, blocks strewn all over the floor, Legos, finger paint. But this is all part of learning. What are kids learning when they're making a huge mess?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought this up because I think that is sometimes a deterrent, the idea that how messy this is going to get. But I need to remind all of your listeners that young children especially learn about the world through their five senses primarily, right? That's why your toddler is trying to lick things and put them in their mouth, because taste is one of the five senses. They want to bang things, they want to hear how things sound, they want to touch everything, they want to lick everything. So that gets really messy really fast. And if you can try to reframe it for yourself as play and learning, it just makes it a little bit easier to find that patience that you need while your children are young. And even older children make a mess when they're playing, right? So again, if you as the parent can adjust your expectations a little bit and remind yourself that making the mess is part of the learning, there's only certain ways that you can learn things, right? Like I mentioned a block tower during one of our previous segments. You as an adult know if you want to build a sturdy block tower, you have to put the bigger blocks on the bottom and the smaller blocks on the top. But the way you learn that was because some adult in your life let you make a big mess with blocks one day, right? And then you probably had to do it like 5 to 10 more times before you actually really learned about that. And that's some early science and math skills right there. So that's that learning happening in real life. That's how they figure that out. Same thing, like let's talk about finger paints, messy painting, right? It makes a huge mess on the table. But I bet you know as an adult what happens when you mix blue and yellow paint together, right? It turns green. How do you know that? You know that because, again, some adult in your life gave you the time and the materials and the most importantly, the opportunity, the actual space in your childhood to get messy with paints. So messy play is so deeply important. There's so much wonderful learning happening. Don't skip it.
What should parents look for when considering a childcare center to enroll their kids in?
One of the most important questions I would suggest that parents ask is, what is their framework or philosophy that they use for their kids when they're thinking about a day in the life of a kid at your center, right? So you might hear terms when you're touring centers, terms like we're a play-based center, we're a Montessori center. At Bright Horizons, we have our own proprietary framework called discovery-driven learning. And what we've done is we've taken all the work from all the child development researchers and visionaries over the last century and basically taken the best parts of all of them and combined them into one framework. So everything we're doing is science and evidence-based. What we know is that children learn best when they are able to explore their own curiosity. They're allowed to exercise their imaginations, right? and they're allowed to pursue their own inquiries. So that's how we really put this child at the center of our framework with discovery-driven learning, and we really prioritize play.
Amazing. Amazing. So now on to our fun little segment, Press Play. What's your takeaway on play being the foundation for success?
Yeah, so the great part about play, I've been talking so much about all the wonderful benefits of play, but one of the really cool parts I think is how interdisciplinary it is. So when a child is playing with something, they're not just working on one skill set for school readiness or future readiness, right? So when they are playing with Play-Doh, they're not just working on fine motor skills. They might also be working on language skills because they're talking to you about what they're doing. They might also be working on math skills. They might be working on science. They might be doing some art. If something goes wrong with the Play-Doh and they get frustrated and they need to regulate themselves, that's social emotional learning that's happening. So just reminding yourself that every opportunity for play is basically checking a whole bunch of boxes at once. It's truly interdisciplinary, and you're just watching all the learning come together for your child. So embrace the mess, prioritize play, let your kids be the scientists that they are.
Thank you so much, Claire. I know that the parents listening are going to be like, we should just embrace the mess and it's inevitable, but it's how they're learning and finding their way in this world. So that's really, really cool to understand. We're looking forward to our upcoming segment from Play Matters with Bright Horizons called Encouraging Play, Tangible Takeaways for Parents. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed this week's Play Matters with Bright Horizons segment. To find a center near you, get access to free parenting resources from experts, and tune in to one of my favorite shows, the Bright Horizons Parenting Podcast, Teach, Play, Love, visit brighthorizons.com. Your eureka moment for Hint was when someone doubted you. Lead us up to that moment with your career trajectory and how you arrived at this aha moment.
I started my career actually in media, and like you, was at CNN at one point in the very early days. Had started my career actually at Time, and then went on to CNN. And then when I moved out to Silicon Valley, I worked for a little startup that was a Steve Jobs idea that was spun out of Apple. I didn't work at Apple, but it was my first foray into sort of Silicon Valley startups. Our company was acquired by America Online, and I was running the e-commerce and shopping partnerships there for 7 years and ended up building a business that was $1 billion to AOL. I actually had my first couple of kids while I was at America Online, and then decided to take some time off. And it was during that time that I was taking time off, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. And sort of the number one thing that I had identified was I didn't want to travel as much. That was the number one thing that I had figured out about what I wanted in a career. And I definitely did want to continue working, but I wasn't sure exactly what that was going to be. But while I was doing that, I was getting pregnant again, had kids very close to one another. And I started looking at what they were putting into their bodies. That kind of led me to really start to question why we're giving our kids apple juice after breast milk or formula. And because I was supplementing with some formula as well. And so after basically dictating what they were going to have, I felt like a hypocrite because I was drinking all this diet soda, Diet Coke in particular. And I decided to quit Diet Coke. I lost a bunch of weight that had been a real issue for me to lose just by switching over to water with some sliced fruit in it. I thought, wouldn't it be so cool if I could put a product on the shelf at Whole Foods and be like the other products on the shelf at Whole Foods? The first day that we ultimately sold product, I was actually delivering my fourth child in the hospital, and I got a phone call from the guy who was stocking the shelf at Whole Foods, and he said, you need to come back and replenish the Hint on the shelf. And I was like, what do you mean, like replenish? He's like, well, it's gone. And I'm like, oh, well, I just gave you 10 cases yesterday. Like, are you sure I hadn't thought that much. Like, what happens when people actually buy it? I just wanted to put it on the shelf. Of course, I wanted to sell it, but I didn't think it was going to happen that fast. Then Whole Foods was saying, okay, well, some of our other regions, like Denver, wants the product and Los Angeles wants the product. And we're a heavy product. So I thought, if I'm going to have to ship the product, the actual cost is going to go up of the product. It's like going to cost me to actually be able to ship this, an all-in cost. So a friend connected me with somebody at Coca-Cola, had a conversation with the very nice gentleman over the phone at Coca-Cola. We didn't have Zoom back then. I told him how this product is selling, and now they want to bring it into different regions, and you guys have all these trucks. I've seen the Coca-Cola trucks all over. And he interrupted me in this conversation and said, "Sweetie, Americans love sweet. This product isn't going anywhere." My life just kind of blanked out at that point. And then I just thought, okay, he just called me sweetie. I'm like sitting here listening, trying to figure out if I'm going to hang up the phone on him or not. And then suddenly I thought, wow, he's actually telling me what he tells his team at this large soda company, that Americans Americans love sweet. They don't need a product like Hint. And here I had seen firsthand that myself and my family had been helped significantly by moving away from all these diet sweeteners. I was a huge diet soda drinker. I was a customer. I was a big customer of theirs. I was called a heavy user. What I saw from that conversation was that I could be offended. I could hang up the phone. I could do all these things, but I had just gotten really valuable insight into how they thought about things. That's when I thought I had a choice. I could either, he wasn't going to distribute the product at that point. He was, trying to get me to quit, which I could definitely do, or I could throw the gas on, because he had one thing that I didn't have, which was a whole lot of capital to put behind a business idea. He wasn't going to help me. I could spend my time trying to convince him that I was right, which I knew I was, but he could turn his big cruise ship around and come after me and basically take my idea when it was like just in a few stores, or I could just throw the gas on and go and make this happen. And so that's what I did.
There is this pivotal moment when you become a mom, I have to say, because now you're just acutely aware of what you're feeding your kids. It just catalyzed a new career path for you. And that's something that, with my experience too, I knew there was TV, but after I became a mom, it was like, I think my life calling is something else. I believe that we all have this intuition. So I want to start there. How did you know that you were like, I'm going to take this big ass risk with my 4 kids and family and all of that to do this venture? Because there's something in your head that's saying you can do it.
What I saw was that I had seen it make such a difference in my own life, giving up this diet soda. And I thought, here I am, thinking that everyone else is going to solve my problems, right? That if I get on their trucks, if I do this, but the reality was that he couldn't see what I saw. And I think that that's the story for so many entrepreneurs, which is super hard, because you feel like you're going up against a wall. You're trying to get people to understand, and they just don't, right? Because they're not visionary entrepreneurs. They don't have the same lens into something, or passion or belief into something, curiosity as to why. They're not willing to sit on phone calls with people who are taking their ideas down, right? And saying that this is discrediting them in some way. Instead, they were dealing with a person who was, used to getting back up again and would just keep at it, because I kept feeling like I was making progress along the way. So for me, the Building Hint actually had a purpose. And I felt like if no one else did this, then it wouldn't actually happen. And I still believe that today. And I think as a parent that I wanted to do something that made a difference. And I think that everyone does want to do something that makes a difference. And if you have an idea to build a company that you think could actually have impact and impact around, something that you and many others care about. Health, I think, is something, it doesn't matter how much money you have, your gender, cultural background, and like health makes a difference in people's lives. And when you don't have it, that is a very sad thing.
And I have to touch on the statistics. In 2023, women made up just a measly 13.2% of all startup founders. 2% of female founders have raised over $1 million, and just a fraction of that percentage are women of color. So the stats are kind of stacked up against us. What was it like going against the odds as a woman running your company?
We raised a lot. Like there's two ways to raise money. It's probably its own podcast, but you can either raise a big chunk of money, which certainly people do in tech and in Silicon Valley when they're going out and starting an idea. But for food and beverage companies, I think we really raised through angel investors along the way. And then as we got a little bit further and it started to look like the company was going to actually be something and do something beyond just the local San Francisco markets, then we were able to raise, through family offices, a couple of family offices. So you have to make sure your audience really understands what you're talking about, right? That here the guy from Coke didn't have a big belief in a no sweetened product, right? Like he was living and had been inside of Coke for many, many years, and he didn't drink anything but products that had sweeteners in them. I think it's the same when you go out and raise money, that if you're going out and really talking about your, in my case, my addiction to diet soda and how I gave it up. I mean, the number of people who were sitting across the table from me who didn't drink Diet Coke, because Diet Coke is typically a female consumed product. I mean, there are men who consume it, but it's way more, right? And I think that's the thing that I always share with entrepreneurs is that if you've got a feminine products company and you're running into a room and it's a bunch of men in the room, they're not even going to be able to hear you, right? Because you're not really speaking to anything that they could relate to. And if they start talking to you about, like, I should talk to my wife about this or my daughter or whatever, they never will.
Tell us a little bit about your motherhood journey.
I have 2 girls and 2 boys, and they're very close in age, which is awesome because they're all really good friends, all 4 very different. And my husband, he was an intellectual property attorney. He, helped me and asked, like, what should be the name on his card for his role in the company. And it was, again, kind of a joke initially, but he soon became the chief operating officer of the company because he wanted to be supportive because we had these 4 kids together. And he knew how much I cared about my family, but also about doing something, growing a business, but also doing something that I knew would have impact. And so he, joined and we built this company together. And I think that you got to find your yang. I did a post about this the other day. Like, we're very different people. People are always, we still have people who say we met in New York City. He was going to law school, actually, with a friend of mine that I grew up with in Arizona. People were like, I can't even believe you 2 are together. On like, they still say that. We're like, we've been married for a long time, but
Yeah.
it's funny because I think that it's the same with being a parent. It's nice to have people who are 2 very different people and have different perspectives because it leads to very healthy conversations. The way that both of us were raised, the way that both of us, we never had sort of a sit down on here's how we're going to parent. Same way, like, here's how we're going to manage people when we were running hint. I mean, I think for us, it was very much about we blend it. And when there's problems that surface, we talk about it and we figure it out. And so I think like that very much is the ethos of, parenting as well as our journey of entrepreneurship and leadership.
How do you reconcile any of the mom guilt? We always feel, am I doing enough? Is this enough? Am I present enough? And it's something that, we really need to silence that inner critic in our head. Is there anything that you've learned that you're like, oh no, I'm good with all that I've imparted?
Well, I think you're never going to be able to totally silence it, right? I think that the beauty of being able to start your own business, though, is that you can, make your own hours to some extent. So I was able to plan out what my day and what my week looked like. And sometimes that would get disrupted if one of the kids, the school nurse called and, I had to cancel everything and go figure out how to do that. But I think the other component was that I had another parent, my husband, in the house who was also, we were able to look at our schedules together and figure out who could do what in order to make it all happen. And if you're not enjoying it, you have to figure out how to do that in some way. And I think it's the same, for being a leader of a company too, or starting a company. If you're not really enjoying it, then you shouldn't be doing it anymore, or you shouldn't do it at all. Later in life, your kids are going to see that you did something that you really enjoyed. And now that I have kids that are, just starting out and after going to school for many, many years, that's what they've seen. Like some of their best friends are making choices to go and do things because they're going to make a lot of money. My kids want to make money and they want to be paid, but they actually feel like if I wait a little longer and figure out what's really going to get me up in the morning, it's all eventually going to work out.
Yes, yes. And lastly, what does your intuition, or as I call mom sense, mean to you?
Everything. I think that's another thing that comes with age. It's like what you're doing every day and the people that you surround yourself with and the vibes or, whatever I think are critical. So I think that the more you have a sense for that, the more, you can be a great parent, be a great entrepreneur, be a great human.
I love that. Thank you so much, Kara, for joining me today and for our friendship and for all your wisdom. This was really, really incredible. And I know my audience is going to just eat this up. Thank you so, so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I hope you got some great takeaways from our conversation. Join my community by logging on to thatstotalmomsense.com. If you haven't already, please subscribe to That's Total Mom Sense, the podcast, wherever you listen, and be sure to rate and review. On socials, my handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta on Instagram, Threads, TikTok, and X. You can also find me on LinkedIn. My episode videos are on YouTube and YouTube podcasts with highlights on YouTube Shorts. Write to me at thatstotalmomsense@gmail.com. My team and I read all your pitches and feedback and are so glad to be in touch. Remember, always trust your mom sense and dad sense. Stay strong, super parents. See you soon.